Welcome to NDTV's YouTube channel. I'm Vishnu Showman. In the next few minutes, I'm going to tell you about some of the big stories that we continue to track today. Well, the biggest story today all around the world is the American elimination of Major General Qassem Soleimani, one of the foremost generals, if not the single most important, most significant general in the Middle East. Now, it's important to understand what we are looking at over here. Qassem Soleimani was killed in an American drone attack at Baghdad airport yesterday. He is somebody entirely backed by the government of Iran, among the most popular leaders in Iran, one of the senior most leaders of their revolutionary corps, and therefore somebody who's had also a very major say as far as Iranian policies are concerned across the region. Over the last several years, General Soleimani has had a major role in building up regional militias, whether in Iran or in Syria or in Yemen or in other areas, building up partnerships and alliances with countries such as Russia as well. In fact, in the battle against ISIS, Soleimani and his various militias had a singular role in backing up the Assad regime in Syria and resulting in the eventual defeat of ISIS as a credible fighting force of the worst terror group mankind has ever known. But I think when you look at Middle Eastern affairs, West Asian affairs, you need to look at it in the context of the power vacuum that has been left behind since the US left Iraq. Remember, it was in 2003 that the US had invaded Iraq. And in that power vacuum, which was then created once the US withdrew, Iran went in a very big way and worked to build up alliances in the region and to try and fill that void that existed. And it was over here that Soleimani played a very major role. Over a period of time, it became clear that the United States and Iran would definitely not seeing eye to eye, with Trump having come to power, with the deal with Iran which had existed, which Obama had worked out earlier on, no longer being valid as far as the US was concerned. It always seemed in 2019 particularly that it was a matter of time before Iran and the United States got into a conflict type situation. But I think it's fair to say now, with the assassination of Major General Soleimani, the possibility of an actual war breaking out in the Middle East is a stark reality, which I think people all over the world are aware of. For starters, Americans have been told in Iraq to leave the country, and there have been threats which have been issued from Iran's supreme leader that Iran will avenge itself. Now, just one other statement or sentence I found very interesting in an article which I read about Soleimani is that this was a person who was powerful enough on the basis of the relationships that he had forged in being able to get onto a car in Iran and driving all the way across the Middle East unstopped till he got to Damascus in Syria. That was the extent of the power that this man had in actually being able to operate across that entire region. So he was killed in an American drone strike which took place earlier on, and a drone strike which took place last night, in fact, along with the head of a regional militia who was affiliated with him. So that was something very big which had actually taken place yesterday itself. But I think there is a certain timeline that we need to look at as well in how Soleimani and Iran came up against the United States and their might. Now, it was in September that drones attacked the Saudi oil processing facilities in Abqaiq. It was an unprecedented attack, a mass wave of cruise missiles and drones. The United States has always believed that Iran was responsible for that, and therefore the role of General Soleimani was something that people would necessarily associate with the role of Iran. Iran, of course, has denied its involvement. On the 27th of last month of December, a US contractor was killed in a rocket attack apparently launched by Iran-affiliated militias in the north of Iraq. 2 days later, the US killed 24 members of the Kataib Hezbollah, which was an Iraqi militia backed by Iran. And then on the 31st, New Year's Eve, there were massive protests outside the US embassy in Baghdad, which was actually breached by members of affiliated or supporters of that same Kataib Hezbollah. And in the attack which took place yesterday, the leader of this Kataib Hezbollah was also killed along with General Soleimani. So that's the immediate build-up to this particular situation. Oil prices have taken a hit. The global economy is looking very closely at this. Iran has said that they're going to avenge themselves. The question is when and where, because, and here's what is now a fact, that the method of warfare which Soleimani actually worked on, asymmetric warfare, is very different from the type of warfare that the United States practices through overwhelming conventional strength. Soleimani built up regional alliances. He was instrumental in putting in money into lots of Shia nations across the region, offering them advice, getting into an arms trade where a lot of weaponry was transported as well. And then, of course, there are regional militias which fight on the basis of conventional military strength, but also as potential terrorist forces. And it's all of this put together which results in an asymmetric force being in a position to actually target the United States. The big question now is that with this elimination having taken place, is the United States seeing an attack on Iran as being almost inevitable at some stage or the other? So that's the big story that we've been tracking on NDTV 24/7. In terms of another story, I interviewed the new army chief, General Manoj Mukund Naravane, yesterday, and he spoke on a series of issues. He did take questions on lots of reports and very strong suggestions that his predecessors' remarks on linked to the Citizenship Amendment Act protests were political in a nature and therefore in contravention of the Army Rules 1954 and therefore was strongly criticized. I did ask him about that, but General Naravane said, and perhaps he would need to say this as being part of that same institution, that the army remains a strong apolitical force, and that going forward into the future, he saw no prospect of that ever having changed. But I think one of the big news points that did emerge was his statement that if mandated, the army would be able to carry out deep strikes within Pakistan-occupied Kashmir. I asked him this question because earlier on, a few months back, there was the Defense Minister Rajnath Singh who had actually said that in a clear threat to Pakistan, that India and its has got its eyes set on Pakistan-occupied Kashmir, which of course we as a country believe is ours and know to be ours. And therefore, whether this was or could be backed by actual military force is something which I wanted to get into, which is what I asked General Naravane, to which he said that if he had the mandate, he would do it, and he would do it successfully. So two important news points emerging in that interview with the new Army Chief, General Naravane. Those are some of the stories we've been tracking on the YouTube channel of NDTV 24/7.